Picture this, a lone researcher surrounded by towering shelves of ancient manuscripts, the air thick with the scent of old paper and dust. His fingers trace the faded ink of a Carolingian chronicle, a text read by thousands before him, when suddenly a phrase leaps from the page. It speaks of something impossible, a book not of parchment or vellum, but forged entirely in bronze, a treasure commissioned by the emperor himself to safeguard his most profound wisdom. In that electrifying moment, a mystery ignored for centuries snaps back into focus. What if this wasn't just a flight of poetic fancy? What if it was real? This is where our story begins, not with a shout, but with a whisper from the distant past, a clue that refuses to stay silent. We are about to embark on a quest for one of history's most tantalizing enigmas, the mystery of the Bronze Book of Charlemagne. We're going to sift through the evidence, follow the trails left by medieval scribes, and ask the daring question: did this legendary artifact truly exist? It's a journey that will take us deep into the heart of the Dark Ages, to a time when an emperor dreamed of a new Rome, a renaissance of the mind, and just maybe a library for the ages written in metal. This isn't just a story about a lost object. It's a story about the power of an idea so potent, so revolutionary, that its echo refused to fade away into silence. It's about the human hunger to preserve knowledge against the relentless march of time, to create something so permanent that not even fire or war could erase it. And at the center of it all stands one of the most monumental figures ever to walk the earth, Charlemagne, King of the Franks, Emperor of the Romans, a colossal force of will who united much of Western Europe through sheer ambition and sword. But he wasn't just a conqueror. He was a patron of learning, a man who gathered the greatest minds of his era to his court in Aachen in a desperate attempt to rekindle the light of knowledge. He understood that true power wasn't just held in a crown, it was held in a book, so the notion that he would command the creation of something as audacious as a bronze book doesn't feel like a fantasy. It feels like a culmination, a permanent record for an empire he hoped would last 1,000 years. Over the next while, we will become detectives. We'll examine the cryptic references, separate plausible theory from wild legend, and walk the same paths medieval monks once did. We'll look at why someone would go to the incredible effort of casting knowledge in metal, and what profound secrets such a book might have contained. This is a puzzle waiting to be solved, and you are right here with me, turning the page, so get comfortable. What you are about to discover will challenge everything you thought you knew about the Dark Ages and the man who tried to illuminate them. To find the origins of this legend, we must travel back to the scattered fragments of history Charlemagne left behind. The earliest whispers of the Bronze Book do not come from a single grand document proclaiming its existence. Instead, they emerge like faint threads woven into the fabric of various chronicles and letters, primarily from the monastic communities that formed the backbone of his scholarly revival. These sources are often ambiguous, their language poetic and open to interpretation. A monk writing decades after the emperor's death might describe the imperial library's glory, mentioning texts so precious they were said to be preserved for eternity in metal. Was this a factual observation or a literary flourish to convey the immense value of the knowledge? This is the central challenge for historians. One compelling theory suggests the Bronze Book was never a single physical object but a powerful metaphor. Charlemagne's entire cultural project, the Carolingian Renaissance, was an attempt to solidify his legacy as a new Roman emperor, a wise and learned ruler. What better symbol for permanence and unassailable authority than a library cast in bronze? It would represent a body of knowledge that could not burn, could not rot, and could not be easily destroyed by the conflicts that perpetually engulfed the continent. In this sense, the legend becomes a piece of brilliant propaganda, a story told to inspire awe and reinforce the image of an empire built to last 1,000 years, its foundational wisdom literally set in stone, or rather in metal. Yet the descriptions that have filtered down through time are tantalizingly specific. The book is often described not as a single casting, but as a collection of individual bronze plates, each one meticulously cast and polished, bound together by heavy rings of iron or even silver. Imagine the sheer weight of such an object. It would be a permanent fixture on a massive lectern, not something to be casually carried around. The craftsmanship required to inscribe text onto these plates would have been extraordinary. Artisans would have needed to use precise chisels or perhaps even acid etching techniques to ensure the letters were deep and legible, a stark contrast to the gentle scratching of a quill on parchment. The cost alone would have been astronomical, consuming vast quantities of copper and tin, materials vital for forging weapons and coins. This immense value, both material and intellectual, transforms the concept from a mere book into a treasure of almost unimaginable worth, a fitting prize for an emperor who saw himself as the heir to Rome's grandeur. Whether metaphor or reality, the legend of the Bronze Book tells us something profound about how Charlemagne wished to be remembered and the incredible lengths he was willing to go to secure his place in history. To understand the environment that could have birthed such an audacious idea, we must step into the vibrant intellectual world Charlemagne fought to create. His court at Aachen was not merely a center of political power, it was the beating heart of what scholars now call the Carolingian Renaissance. After centuries of instability and fractured learning following the fall of Rome, Charlemagne launched a deliberate and breathtakingly ambitious project to reverse the cultural decline. He envisioned a new empire, a Christian Rome reborn, and he knew that such an entity could not be sustained by military might alone. It required a foundation of knowledge, a unified intellectual and spiritual framework that could bind his diverse lands together. This was the driving passion behind his gathering of the greatest minds of the age, transforming his palace into a beacon that drew scholars from across Europe, from Italy, Spain, Ireland, and most famously from Anglo-Saxon England. The most illustrious of these figures was Alcuin of York, a master of rhetoric, logic, and theology, whom Charlemagne personally invited to lead his palace school. Under Alcuin's guidance, the school became an engine of cultural revival. It was a place where the sons of nobles and even the emperor himself were taught the 7 liberal arts, from grammar and rhetoric to astronomy and music. Scribes were put to work in a massive, coordinated effort to copy and preserve ancient manuscripts, from the works of Roman poets like Virgil to the writings of the early church fathers. These scribes developed a new, clear style of handwriting known as Carolingian minuscule, which dramatically improved legibility and became the ancestor of our modern lowercase alphabet. This was not a casual interest for Charlemagne. It was a systematic, state-sponsored mission to rescue knowledge from oblivion. In this climate of intense scholarly activity, where the very act of writing was seen as a sacred duty to future generations, the concept of a permanent, imperishable record takes on a powerful logic. So what knowledge would have been deemed worthy of such a monumental effort? What texts were so crucial to the empire's identity and survival that they warranted being forged in metal? Several compelling candidates emerge. First and most obvious are sacred texts. A complete copy of the Gospels or the Psalms cast in bronze would have been the ultimate reliquary of the divine word, a physical manifestation of the empire's faith that could never be destroyed by heresy or fire. Second, and equally plausible, are the laws of the empire. Charlemagne issued a vast number of capitularies, detailed legal decrees that governed everything from church administration to military service. Casting these laws in bronze would literally set them in stone, making them immutable, permanent, and a powerful symbol of imperial authority that no local noble could ignore or alter. Beyond the spiritual and the legal, there is the realm of the practical and the profound. Advanced astronomical charts, crucial for calculating the correct date of Easter and for navigation, would be priceless state secrets. Complex geometric and architectural treatises, perhaps containing the building principles behind the grand cathedrals and palaces he constructed, could be another candidate. Some have even speculated about military knowledge, siege engine designs, strategic maps, or troop deployment tactics, the kind of information an emperor would go to extraordinary lengths to protect. The very existence of such a hub of learning, buzzing with the most advanced ideas of the time, makes the Bronze Book not just a fanciful legend, but a conceivable, if extraordinarily ambitious, project for a ruler who thought in terms of centuries, not years. The stage was set, the minds were present, and the motivation was overpowering. The only question that remained was one of execution. This leads us to the most captivating question of all. If the Bronze Book was real, what incredible knowledge was locked within its metal pages? What wisdom did Charlemagne and his advisors deem so vital, so essential to the survival of his empire, that it deserved the ultimate protection of permanence? The possibilities are as fascinating as they are varied, each one revealing a different facet of the emperor's grand ambitions. One of the strongest contenders is a sacred text. Charlemagne's entire reign was in many ways a divine mission to create a unified Christian empire. Heresy was a constant threat, and variations in religious text from monastery to monastery could lead to doctrinal confusion and division. A complete, authorized version of the Bible, meticulously checked and approved by his scholars like Alcuin, and then cast in bronze, would be the ultimate tool for standardization. It would become the unchangeable, official word of God for his realm, a physical anchor for the faith that could be sent to major churches as the indisputable source of truth. Imagine the power of such an object, not a fragile parchment a jealous bishop could alter, but a massive, immutable metal tome that literally and figuratively set doctrine in stone. Beyond the spiritual, the practical needs of governing a vast territory point to another compelling possibility. Law. Charlemagne was a prolific lawgiver, issuing hundreds of detailed legal decrees known as capitularies. These laws covered everything from the price of grain and the proper administration of justice to the required equipment for a cavalryman. Yet these laws were disseminated on perishable parchment, vulnerable to being lost, ignored, or deliberately misinterpreted by local lords. A complete legal code, perhaps even incorporating the older, foundational laws of the Salian Franks, cast in bronze, would be a masterstroke of political power. It would be a permanent, undeniable declaration of imperial authority, a central reference that no count or duke could claim to have not seen or understood. Its very existence would proclaim that the law of the emperor was as solid and enduring as the metal it was printed on. The scope of Charlemagne's curiosity, however, stretched far beyond theology and law. His court was a clearinghouse for the most advanced knowledge of the ancient world and his own time. This opens the door to more esoteric contents. A comprehensive atlas of the known world, based on Roman maps and the reports of his merchants and envoys, would have been a state secret of immense value. Detailed alchemical formulas seeking the secrets of transmutation or the creation of miraculous medicines would have been a prized pursuit for a ruler seeking every advantage. There is even the tantalizing, though less likely, possibility of a philosophical treatise on the nature of kingship, penned by Charlemagne himself or dictated to a scribe, laying out his personal vision for righteous rule and the duties of a Christian emperor. The contents are less important than the statement their preservation would make. A bronze book, regardless of its specific text, would be the ultimate act of defiance against time and chaos. It would declare that the light of knowledge, once rekindled, would never be allowed to fade again. It would be a declaration that the empire of the Franks was not a fleeting conquest, but a new civilization built to last, its foundational wisdom secured against fire, war, and the slow decay of ages. The very act of creating it would be the purest expression of Charlemagne's greatest ambition, to forge an eternal legacy. Yet for all the grand symbolism and compelling motives, we must confront a stark and practical question. Could such an object have even been made? When we move from the realm of high-minded ideals to the gritty reality of an 8th century forge, the legend of the Bronze Book runs headlong into a wall of immense physical and logistical challenges. The vision of a librarian casually turning a page of solid metal quickly evaporates when we consider the sheer weight of such a creation. Bronze is an alloy primarily of copper and tin, and it is incredibly dense. Even a single plate cast to the size of a large folio manuscript, say 18 inches tall and a foot wide, and a mere quarter of an inch thick, would weigh dozens of pounds. Now imagine 20 such plates or 50. You are no longer describing a book, but a collection of artifacts with the total weight of a full suit of plate armor, requiring a team of men and a sturdy cart just to move it from one room to another. This wouldn't be a text for study. It would be a permanent, immovable monument bolted to a massive stone lectern, more akin to a stele or an obelisk than any book as we understand it. The challenge extends far beyond simple weight, deep into the sophisticated realm of metallurgy. Producing consistent, flat sheets of bronze of that size and thinness would have pushed Carolingian metalworkers to the absolute limits of their technology. They were masters of casting bells, statues, and weapons objects with significant depth and volume. But creating a flawlessly flat, smooth plate is an entirely different art. Any imperfection in the mold, any fluctuation in the temperature of the molten metal, or any inconsistency in the cooling process would result in warping, bubbling, or cracking, rendering the plate useless for the precise inscription of text. The sheer volume of raw materials required would also be staggering. Copper and tin were not cheap or readily available commodities. They were strategic resources, vital for minting the coins that fueled the economy and for forging the weapons that defended the empire. Diverting enough metal to create an entire library of plates would have been an economic decision of monumental proportions, a cost so immense it would surely have been noted in treasury records or chronicles, yet we find no such evidence. Then comes the most delicate problem of all. How do you put the words onto the metal? One method would be to inscribe the text by hand using a chisel and hammer. But this is a painstaking, brutally slow process with zero tolerance for error. A single misplaced strike, a slight slip of the hand, and an entire plate, representing weeks of labor and a small fortune in materials, could be ruined. The scribe would need to be part scholar and part master engraver, transferring incredibly complex text letter by perfect letter onto an unforgiving metallic surface. The alternative, casting each individual page with the text already formed in relief, is arguably an even more daunting prospect. This would require creating a perfect negative mold of the entire page text for every single plate, a task of such intricate precision it is difficult to fathom with the technology of the time. Any error in the mold would be replicated in every casting. The amount of fuel needed to fire the furnaces to melt bronze for each plate would have been enormous, requiring entire forests of charcoal. When we stack these practical hurdles one on top of the other, the weight, the material cost, the metallurgical precision, and the insane difficulty of inscription, the idea shifts from being merely ambitious to appearing nearly impossible. This doesn't mean it couldn't have been done. The human drive to achieve the extraordinary often defies logic, but it forces us to wonder if the legend persevered precisely because it described something so wondrous, so far beyond normal experience, that it captured the imagination in a way a simple parchment book never could. Given these immense physical obstacles, a powerful alternative interpretation emerges, one that requires no furnaces or chisels but is perhaps even more profound. What if the legendary Bronze Book was never meant to be held, but was instead a concept, a brilliant piece of political poetry designed to convey an idea too potent for simple words? In this view, the book becomes a masterful metaphor, a symbolic representation of everything Charlemagne hoped to achieve. Bronze, throughout history, has been the material of monuments, of statues meant to endure for millennia and coins meant to circulate authority. It signifies permanence, unwavering strength, and defiance against the erosion of time. To speak of a book made from this metal is to speak of knowledge that is unassailable, a legacy that cannot be burned by invaders, decayed by neglect, or forgotten through the carelessness of future generations. The legend, then, is not about a search for a lost object, but an invitation to understand the emperor's deepest ambition. This symbolic book's contents are not hidden on metal plates, but are scattered throughout the very fabric of his reign, waiting to be read by historians. Its first and most important chapter would be his law, the vast collection of capitularies. These were not mere suggestions. They were detailed decrees sent across his empire to standardize justice, economics, and religious practice. By creating a unified legal system, Charlemagne was effectively inscribing the rules of his new society into the foundation of Europe itself. This was knowledge that needed to be as permanent as bronze, and in a way it was, for these laws became the bedrock upon which later medieval legal codes were built. The metaphor extends to his monumental effort to preserve and copy ancient manuscripts. This was not a hobby, it was a deliberate act of intellectual salvage, a rescue mission for the wisdom of the past. Each meticulously copied text by a monk in a scriptorium was another page saved from oblivion, another piece of the empire's mental library secured against the dark. In this light, the entire Carolingian Renaissance can be seen as the casting of a colossal, collective book. Perhaps the most compelling volume in this symbolic library was the very idea of empire itself. Charlemagne's coronation as Emperor of the Romans on Christmas Day in the year 800 was a conscious revival of a title dormant in the West for over 3 centuries. He was building a new Rome, a Christian empire that he believed would stand as long as the ancient ruins that still dotted the landscape. This grand political project needed a narrative, a story of destiny and divine favor that would legitimize his rule and bind his people together. The legend of a bronze book, imperishable and awe-inspiring, serves as the perfect symbol for this. It is a story about the immortality of ideas, the idea of unified rule, the idea of a learned Christian society, the idea of a legacy that would not fade. The power of this metaphor is why the tale has persisted for over 1,000 years. It resonates because it speaks a fundamental truth. Charlemagne's most enduring creation wasn't a thing, but a dream of order and light carved out of the chaos of the Dark Ages, a dream so powerful we are still trying to read its pages today. So we are left with a haunting question, one that has tantalized treasure hunters and historians for centuries. If, against all the formidable odds, a bronze book was actually created, where did it go? How could something so massive, so valuable, and so symbolically powerful simply vanish from the historical record without a trace? The silence is deafening, and it forces us to turn to the brutal realities of the world that followed Charlemagne's golden age, a world that quickly descended into the very chaos his empire was built to prevent. The most likely answer is that it fell victim to one of the great catastrophes that repeatedly scarred medieval Europe. Its metal pages sacrificed not to time, but to human greed and violence. The most immediate and compelling theory points directly to the Viking incursions. Just decades after Charlemagne's death, his vast empire began to fracture under the squabbling of his grandsons, and its undefended coastlines and riverways became highways for Norse warriors. These were not just raiders, they were pragmatic opportunists who prized silver above all else, but who also understood the raw value of bulk metal. A monastery housing such a treasure would have been a prime target. Imagine the scene, a fortified religious house on the Rhine or the Seine, its gates battered down by axe-wielding warriors. They ransacked the chapel, tearing gold leaf from reliquaries and stuffing silver chalices into sacks. Then they find it, a colossal, bewildering object of heavy bronze plates. To the monks, it was a sacred repository of divine or imperial wisdom. To a Viking raider, it was not a book to be read, but several £100 of valuable scrap metal. It would have been dragged outside, broken apart with hammers if necessary, and loaded onto longships to be melted down in some northern smithy. There, under the heat of a forge, the accumulated knowledge of an emperor would have been recast into something far more mundane and immediate: nails for ships, rivets for armor, or ingots for trade. The greatest library ever conceived could have ended its life as a handful of common coins, its history liquidated into currency. Another possibility is that it was hidden, not destroyed. Faced with the terrifying approach of an invading army, a conscientious abbot or a loyal courtier might have made a desperate decision to protect the empire's greatest treasure. They would have needed a secure location far from the major centers of power that were obvious targets. A remote monastic cell in the Alps, a forgotten cave network, or a sealed crypt beneath an unremarkable chapel could have become its tomb. The individuals who knew the secret might have perished in the very conflicts they sought to evade, taking the location to their graves. This theory transforms the Bronze Book from a lost object into a sleeping one, waiting for some chance discovery. It fuels dreams of a medieval Dead Sea Scrolls moment, where a shepherd or a hiker stumbles upon an entrance that leads not to dusty parchment, but to gleaming metal plates, their inscriptions still clear after more than a millennium. Yet the sheer weight and bulk of the object make this a logistical nightmare. Transporting it across dangerous, roadless terrain would have required a significant and noticeable effort, a secret very difficult to keep. A more tantalizing, if speculative, theory connects the book to the rituals of death and legacy. In the ancient world, pharaohs were buried with items to assist them in the afterlife. Could Charlemagne, who saw himself as a new kind of Christian emperor, have been influenced by such powerful symbolism? His burial in Aachen was a significant event, and while the accounts don't mention a library of metal being interred with him, it's not entirely beyond the realm of possibility for a man obsessed with permanence. Perhaps it was not with him, but with a beloved heir or a key advisor. The book would then reside not in a library, but in a sepulchre, a guardian of knowledge keeping watch over its keeper for eternity. This would mean the Bronze Book is not lost in a field or at the bottom of a river, but lies in a known location, waiting just beyond a stone wall in a centuries-old crypt hidden in plain sight. Modern scans of imperial burial sites could, in theory, one day detect the strange, dense anomaly of a stack of metal plates, solving the mystery in an instant. Each theory, from the violently pragmatic to the romantically occulted, paints a picture of a fragile world where even the most permanent of things were terrifyingly vulnerable. The Viking theory speaks to the destructive power of upheaval and the fact that value is often in the eye of the beholder. What is priceless to one culture is raw material to another. The hiding theory offers a thread of hope, a testament to human devotion and the lengths we go to preserve our heritage. The burial theory connects Charlemagne to the timeless, almost primal urge to take our greatest treasures with us into the unknown. The fate of the Bronze Book, if it existed, is a mystery locked within the larger tragedy of the empire's collapse. A single, potent symbol of how easily light can be extinguished and how the most enduring monuments can be undone by the relentless tide of history. Yet as the Carolingian Empire fragmented and the direct memory of Charlemagne's court faded into history, the story of the Bronze Book began a remarkable transformation. It drifted from the quiet scriptoria of monastic chroniclers into the vibrant, unpredictable world of oral tradition, passed along by troubadours, minstrels, and storytellers in bustling market squares and dimly lit castle halls. With each retelling, the line between documented fact and romantic embellishment blurred, the original metaphor or obscure report slowly gaining new layers of wonder and speculation. A chronicler's poetic phrase about wisdom preserved in metal could easily become, in the hands of an entertainer seeking to captivate an audience, a literal, gleaming artifact hidden away in a forgotten crypt. This was the beginning of a process we might call medieval Chinese whispers, where a story evolves as it travels, shaped by the hopes, fears, and imaginations of those who tell it. By the High Middle Ages, the legend had been enthusiastically adopted by courtly poets seeking to flatter their patrons by connecting them to the glorious past of Charlemagne. In these romances, the Bronze Book was no longer just a repository of laws or gospels. It became a symbol of ultimate, almost magical authority. A troubadour might sing of a noble knight on a quest who discovers the book, and by reading its metallic pages, learns the lost secrets of true justice or gains the wisdom to heal a divided kingdom. The book's contents began to expand beyond the plausible into the fantastical, reflecting the broader cultural interests of the time. In an era obsessed with relic hunting and the mysteries of the divine, stories circulated that the book contained not just the words of the Bible, but the actual blueprints for Solomon's temple or a first-hand account of Christ's ministry written by Joseph of Arimathea. Its creation was often attributed not to Carolingian metalsmiths, but to supernatural aid forged by angels or with the assistance of a mysterious, wise wizard figure, linking Charlemagne to the Arthurian legends that were also gaining popularity. The late Middle Ages and the dawn of the Renaissance saw the most dramatic evolution of the tale, as it was seized upon by alchemists, hermetic scholars, and early antiquarians. For these men, living in a time of renewed interest in ancient secrets and hidden knowledge, the Bronze Book represented the ultimate prize. They projected their own obsessions onto its legendary pages. To an alchemist, it wasn't a legal codex but the paramount grimoire containing the secret of the philosopher's stone itself, the formula for transmuting base metal into gold and achieving immortality. They speculated that Charlemagne had not merely preserved knowledge, but had secured the greatest secret of the ancient world. Geographers and explorers of the Age of Discovery, marveling at new maps, wondered if the bronze plates might chart lands beyond their understanding, including the lost continent of Atlantis or the mythical kingdom of Prestigion. The book became a universal key for every unsolved mystery, a convenient repository for any idea that was compelling but just out of reach. This process of embellishment wasn't mere fiction, it was a form of historical digestion. Each generation reinterpreted the legend through its own lens, using the idea of the Bronze Book to explore its own deepest yearnings for lost wisdom, ultimate authority, and the secrets of the universe. The original, simpler concept, a powerful metaphor for permanence, proved so sturdy that it could support these ever grander layers of myth. The legend grew not because people were trying to deceive, but because the human mind is irresistibly drawn to the idea of a single, perfect source of truth, a complete answer to all questions locked away in a form that can never be lost. The Bronze Book of Charlemagne, through this centuries-long game of telephone, ceased to be a historical artifact and became a mirror, reflecting back whatever each new era desired most. The intellectual fervor of the 19th century, with its potent mix of romantic idealism and burgeoning scientific inquiry, breathed entirely new life into the ancient legend. As Europe looked to its past to forge modern national identities, the figure of Charlemagne was resurrected as a colossal German and French hero, a symbol of a unified, learned, and powerful continent. This wasn't just academic curiosity, it was a form of patriotic devotion, and the search for his greatest relic became a quest for a tangible piece of that glorious heritage. The dusty shelves of monastic libraries, long ignored as relics of superstition, were suddenly seen as treasure maps. Eager antiquarians, armed with a new faith in empirical evidence and a romantic passion for the medieval world, began to scour these archives with a fresh purpose. They were no longer just copying texts, they were reading them as detectives would read a case file, searching for the one overlooked clue that could crack the mystery wide open. This new generation of hunters was led by a fascinating cast of characters, often wealthy, independently minded scholars and amateur archaeologists who combined meticulous research with a bold, almost swashbuckling sense of adventure. In Germany, figures like the Baron von Stein, a passionate collector of Carolingian artifacts, dedicated enormous personal resources to following the thinnest of leads. They would travel for days by carriage to remote monasteries, poring over crumbling charters and donation ledgers, not for their spiritual content, but for any fleeting mention of a liber, a book of bronze, or an unusual expenditure of copper and tin. Their approach was a unique blend of the scholarly and the speculative. A single line in an inventory from a 9th century abbey, noting a heavy tome of unusual material, would be enough to send them petitioning local bishops for permission to excavate crypts and inspect church foundations. Their methods, by today's standards, were often more destructive than preservative. Driven by an unwavering conviction that the book was hidden just out of sight, these treasure seekers would sometimes break open ancient walls or dig up flagstone floors based on little more than a local folktale or a gut feeling. They operated under a new, powerful assumption. If the Bronze Book had survived the Vikings, it wouldn't be in plain view. It would have been concealed during some later period of chaos, like the 30 Years' War, and then its location forgotten. Their searches therefore focused on the hidden spaces of old Europe, sealed ossuaries beneath churches, forgotten tunnels beneath Carolingian palaces like Aachen and Ingelheim, and the ruins of monasteries known to have been favored by the emperor's court. They were chasing a ghost, but they did so with a fervor that fundamentally changed how we interact with history, transitioning from passive study to active physical pursuit. They may not have found the book, but in their passionate, sometimes reckless quest, they helped lay the groundwork for the modern science of archaeology, proving that history isn't just written in texts, it's buried in the ground, waiting for someone determined enough to dig. If there is one place on Earth that stands as the epicenter of this centuries-long search, it is the very heart of Charlemagne's power, Aachen Cathedral. This magnificent structure is not just a church, it is a physical extension of the emperor's ambition, his final resting place, and logically, the most compelling location to hide his greatest treasure. The cathedral itself is a layered history book built in stone. Its core is the Palatine Chapel, commissioned by Charlemagne around 796 and inspired by the Byzantine churches of Ravenna, a direct statement of his claim to Roman imperial grandeur. For centuries, this was the coronation church for German kings, a place where power and sanctity were inextricably linked. The building has been expanded and modified over 1,000 years, creating a labyrinth of older and newer sections, hidden passages, and sealed-off spaces, a perfect environment for a secret to remain hidden. We know for a fact that the cathedral already houses an incredible collection of verified Carolingian treasures, which only fuels the speculation. The most famous is the Proserpina sarcophagus, a stunning ancient Roman marble coffin that Charlemagne himself was originally buried in before his remains were later moved. There is also his throne, a surprisingly simple marble chair that sits in the upper gallery, where over 30 German kings were crowned. But the most tantalizing artifacts are the sacred relics he collected, many of which are still brought out for veneration every 7 years. This proven history of preservation makes the idea that the cathedral could hold one more, far greater secret feel less like fantasy and more like a distinct possibility. The question that has consumed researchers is not if the cathedral has secrets, but how many and where to even begin looking. The most logical place to search is beneath the floor. In the 19th century, amidst the romantic fervor to uncover the past, a series of investigations were indeed conducted. The most significant was led by a cathedral architect named Friedrich Albert in 1861, who was given permission to explore the area directly beneath Charlemagne's throne. What they found was astonishing, but not the Bronze Book. Instead, they discovered a hidden, sealed chamber containing what is now known as the lost treasury of the Carolingians. a hoard of exquisite artifacts including the beautiful bronze laudatory cross and a plethora of Roman and Byzantine antiquities that Charlemagne had collected. This find was a sensation, proving that secrets of immense value really were concealed within the building's fabric. Yet, for hunters of the metal book, it was also a frustrating near miss. It proved the principle of hidden chambers but left the biggest prize still undiscovered. This discovery raises the thrilling possibility that other sealed spaces might exist, perhaps behind the thick walls of the original chapel or even deeper beneath the foundations. Modern technology offers tools those 19th-century explorers could never have dreamed of. Ground-penetrating radar could map anomalies beneath the marble floors without disturbing a single stone. Thermal imaging might detect voids behind ancient walls where the temperature differs slightly from the surrounding stone. Magnetometry could, in theory, pick up the distinct signature of a large metallic object. A comprehensive, non-invasive survey could be conducted, turning the entire cathedral into a transparent digital model and revealing its hidden anatomy. However, this is where the cold water of reality hits the hot flame of curiosity. Aachen Cathedral is not an archaeological site. It is a living, breathing center of worship for thousands of people, one of the oldest and most important pilgrimage sites in Northern Europe. The ethical and practical challenges of conducting any kind of search here are immense. The primary duty of the church authorities is to the sanctity of the space and the continuity of daily services. The idea of bringing in drilling equipment, tearing up ancient mosaics, or knocking down walls is simply unthinkable. It would be an act of desecration, not discovery. Even non-invasive scans require careful consideration. Where does respectful inquiry end and intrusive prying begin? The Diocese of Aachen would have to weigh the historical value of a potential discovery against the guaranteed disruption to its community and the risk of damaging a UNESCO World Heritage Site. Furthermore, there is a powerful theological and cultural argument against the search. For many, the true treasure of Aachen is not a lost book, but the uninterrupted tradition of faith that has continued there for over 12 centuries. The mystery itself holds a certain sacred power. Finding a definitive answer, one way or another, could somehow diminish the cathedral's aura, replacing wonder with certainty. The legend of the Bronze Book is a part of the cathedral's story now, woven into its identity as firmly as the stones in its walls. To solve the mystery might be to lose a small piece of the magic that makes Aachen so compelling. So the search remains suspended, caught between the relentless drive of historical inquiry and the profound respect for a living tradition. A perfect symbol of how the past is never truly past, but something we must constantly and carefully negotiate within the present. But this line of inquiry leads us down a darker, more conspiratorial path, one that implicates the most powerful and enduring institution of the Middle Ages, the Catholic Church itself. If the book was real and its contents were as revolutionary as some theories suggest, then the Church would have been the only entity with the reach, the motivation, and the authority to make it disappear from history completely. Imagine a scenario where the Bronze Book did not contain approved gospels or imperial laws, but something far more dangerous. What if it preserved an alternate Christian history, a Gnostic gospel that challenged the very foundations of church authority, or philosophical ideas deemed heretical by later councils? Charlemagne's court was a surprisingly open marketplace of ideas for its time, but orthodoxy was swiftly hardening in the centuries that followed. A book of such immense physical permanence, proclaiming a doctrine the Church had worked to suppress, would represent an existential threat. It couldn't be debated, it could only be destroyed or hidden away forever, its very existence erased from the record. The silence surrounding the Bronze Book could then be seen not as an accident of history, but as the result of a successful, centuries-long cover-up. Conversely, the Church might not have been the villain in this story, but the guardian. Perhaps the most sacred duty of the great monastic orders was the preservation of knowledge through dark times. A small, secretive group within the church may be the Benedictines of a particular abbey or the personal guardians of the emperor's tomb could have been entrusted with the book's protection. Their vow would have been one of absolute silence, passing the secret from one generation of monks to the next. In this reading, the disappearance of the book is not a suppression but a successful act of preservation. They would have chosen to hide it not out of fear of its power, but to protect it from the very real dangers of Viking raids, political upheavals, and the slow decay of time. This secret knowledge would have granted the order immense, intangible power, a sense of being the direct inheritors of Charlemagne's final and most important commission. The weight of such a secret is unimaginable. It transforms a quiet life of prayer into a thrilling, silent vigil across dozens of generations. This theory of guardianship opens up a fascinating possibility that the secret may have been kept too well. The meticulous oral tradition, the handover of the duty from an aging abbot to his most trusted novice, could have been broken by any number of tragedies. The Black Death that wiped out entire communities in the 14th century, a fire that consumed a monastery and its keepers, or simply the gradual fading of the original purpose over hundreds of years could have severed the chain. The last guardian might have died without a successor, taking the location to his grave and leaving the book not lost, but patiently waiting in a forgotten vault for someone to stumble upon it by chance. This adds a profound layer of tragic irony to the mystery. The very measures taken to protect the empire's greatest treasure may have been what ultimately consigned it to oblivion, a secret kept so perfectly that it became a ghost. Whether suppressor or protector, the Church's potential role transforms the search from an archaeological dig into a theological thriller, where faith, power, and secrets are intertwined in a way that makes the legend endlessly compelling. This captivating ambiguity between historical whisper and literary device has made the Bronze Book a perfect catalyst for fiction, a gleaming prize for authors who thrive in the shadowy territory where fact meets fantasy. The legend provides just enough historical plausibility to anchor a wild narrative, offering a foundation of real-world intrigue upon which writers can construct elaborate tales of adventure, conspiracy, and intellectual pursuit. It functions as the ultimate MacGuffin, an object of immense desired value that propels the plot forward, forcing characters to overcome incredible obstacles in their quest to possess it. The specific contents of the book become a blank canvas for an author's imagination, allowing them to project whatever revolutionary secret would most thrill a modern audience, from earth-shattering religious revelations to advanced ancient technologies. No author has played with these ideas more masterfully than the Italian semiotician and novelist Umberto Eco, a man who seemed to exist simultaneously in the medieval and modern worlds. In his 2002 novel Bordellino, Eco places the Bronze Book, or more precisely the quest to find it, at the very heart of a sprawling, picaresque adventure. The story is told by its titular hero, a cunning peasant boy adopted by Emperor Frederick Barbarossa, who spins a fantastic tale of his travels to the mythical realm of Prester John. For Bordellino and his companions, the book is not a Carolingian artifact but a far older one, a divine guide to a sacred kingdom. Eco, with his profound understanding of medieval mindsets, uses the legend not as a puzzle to be solved, but as a metaphor for the endless human capacity for storytelling, self-deception, and the desperate need to believe in something greater. The brilliance of his approach is that the object itself remains perpetually out of reach, its reality secondary to the powerful drive it creates in those who seek it. Beyond Eco, the trope of the ancient, indestructible book containing forbidden knowledge is a powerful staple in adventure fiction, from James Rowland's Sigma Force novels to Steve Barry's Cotton Malone series. These stories often amp up the stakes, suggesting the Bronze Book could hold the location of the Garden of Eden, the true origins of the Holy Grail, or alchemical formulas that could destabilize the global economy. The common thread is the transformation of Charlemagne from a historical figure into a mythical guardian, a proto-Indiana Jones figure who locked away the world's most dangerous secret for its own protection. This fictional treatment has profoundly shaped the public's perception of the legend, often blurring the lines between established history and entertaining speculation. For many, their first and only encounter with the idea of a Carolingian metal book is through these thrilling narratives, which prioritize pace and excitement over historical nuance. The influence extends onto the screen, where the visual spectacle of such an artifact is irresistible. While no major film has centered on Charlemagne's Bronze Book specifically, the concept of an ancient metallic manuscript has appeared in everything from fantasy epics to television shows like Relic Hunter or The Librarians. The imagery is always potent and consistent. The discovery of a hidden chamber, the camera panning across a dusty, gleaming surface, and the awe-struck characters gently brushing away centuries of grime to reveal perfectly preserved script. This visual language, repeated across popular culture, reinforces the idea of the Bronze Book as a tangible, discoverable object, solidifying its place in the modern mythos far more effectively than any academic paper ever could. This cross-pollination between history and fiction is not a distortion but a vital part of the legend's longevity. The novelists and filmmakers are, in their own way, continuing the same tradition as the medieval troubadours who first sang of the emperor's wondrous artifact. They are taking a compelling seed of an idea and nurturing it into a story that resonates with the hopes and fears of their own time. Whether it's a quest for divine truth, ultimate power, or simply the preservation of beauty, the Bronze Book serves as a perfect symbol. It reminds us that our fascination with the past is not just about what was, but about what might have been, and the thrilling possibility that incredible secrets from the Age of Emperors still lie waiting just out of sight for someone to turn the page. To move beyond speculation and into the realm of tangible evidence, we must bring modern science into our medieval mystery. This means posing our question to the very people who understand the nature of metal itself, materials scientists and metallurgists. By examining the feasibility of such an object through the lens of 9th century technology, we can either dismantle the legend with cold, hard facts or uncover a possibility that makes it all the more astonishing. The primary challenge, as any engineer would point out, is the production of the plates themselves. Creating large, flat, and thin sheets of bronze is a complex process even today. The Carolingians would have likely used a technique called sand casting. This involves creating a negative impression of the desired object in tightly packed fine sand, then pouring molten bronze into the mold. For a simple object like a spearhead or a bell, this is straightforward. But for a large, flat plate, the problems multiply exponentially. The molten metal must cool and solidify at a perfectly even rate across the entire surface. Any variation in temperature or an impurity in the sand mold would cause significant warping, cracking, or bubbling, rendering the plate useless for the precise inscription of text. The larger the plate, the more difficult it becomes to control these variables. Producing just one flawless plate would have been a monumental achievement of craftsmanship, producing an entire book's worth borders on the miraculous. Then there is the matter of the bronze alloy itself. Bronze is not a single, uniform substance. It is an alloy primarily of copper and tin, and its properties change dramatically based on the ratio of these metals. A higher tin content makes the alloy harder, more brittle, and gives it a lower melting point, which could have made it easier to cast but far more difficult to inscribe without shattering. A lower tin content results in a softer, more malleable metal, easier to engrave but more prone to bending and deformation over time. Scientists would ask, what was the specific composition of Carolingian bronze? Fortunately, we can answer this through a process called spectroscopic analysis. By studying known artifacts from the period, everything from clasps and bowls to church bells, researchers can use high-powered instruments to precisely identify their elemental makeup. This analysis reveals that Carolingian metalsmiths were skilled empiricists, often tweaking their formulas for specific purposes. They understood their craft intuitively. The question becomes, could they have developed a special proprietary alloy specifically for this unprecedented project? A unique blend of copper, tin, and perhaps a small amount of another element like lead to improve fluidity for casting, or zinc to alter the color and hardness. It is not beyond the realm of possibility that the emperor's master metalsmiths, working under imperial decree, could have experimented for months to create the perfect recipe for a writable bronze plate. The final and perhaps most fascinating scientific hurdle is the inscription process itself. How do you put words onto metal? The two most plausible methods are engraving and casting. Engraving with a chisel and hammer is a high-risk, zero-tolerance endeavor. The scribe, likely a master calligrapher, would have to transfer the complex text onto the metal plate and then, with a steady hand and flawless precision, carve each letter into the surface. A single slip, a misplaced strike, and the entire plate, representing weeks of labor and a fortune in materials, could be ruined. The alternative, casting the text in relief directly onto the plate, is an even more daunting prospect. This would require creating a perfect negative mold of the entire page text for every single plate. The level of detail needed to capture the fine serifs and curves of Carolingian minuscule script in a sand mold is almost unimaginable. Any flaw in the mold would be replicated in every casting. Some have proposed a third method. Perhaps the text was not carved at all, but inlaid. This would involve engraving the letters and then filling them with a contrasting material like silver or black enamel to make them stand out, a technique seen in other luxury metalwork of the era. This would have been slightly more forgiving, but would have added another layer of immense complexity and cost to an already astronomically expensive project. The scientific verdict, therefore, is not a simple yes or no, but a spectrum of extreme difficulty. The creation of a bronze book would not have been impossible, but it would have represented the absolute pinnacle of Carolingian metallurgy, a project that would have consumed vast resources and required the coordinated genius of the empire's very best smiths, craftsmen, and scholars. It would have been the equivalent of a modern space program, a massive, expensive, and borderline impossible undertaking driven by the will of a ruler who refused to accept the word no. The absence of any archaeological evidence for such a massive industrial effort is a significant mark against its existence. Yet, the fact that the science does not outright preclude it allows the legend to retain a sliver of brilliant, tantalizing plausibility, a testament not to what was easy, but to what a man like Charlemagne might have dared to achieve. Amidst all these grand theories of hidden treasure and deliberate suppression, perhaps the most elegant and convincing solution is also the simplest. What if the legendary bronze book never existed as a single, glorious object, but was born from a simple, centuries-old case of mistaken identity? This is the core of the palimpsest theory, which suggests that the legend is not a lie, but a linguistic ghost, a whisper that grew into a shout as it was passed down through generations of scribes who misunderstood the original source material. To understand how this could happen, we need to step into the mindset of a medieval monk, for whom a book was not just a container for words, but a sacred object in its own right, a physical testament to the value of the knowledge it contained. Consider the description of a particularly magnificent gospel book, one commissioned directly by the emperor's court. Its covers might be made of solid oak, but they could be overlaid with sheets of hammered bronze, intricately engraved with scenes of the evangelists. It might have heavy, ornate clasps made of solid bronze to hold its thick vellum pages securely shut, or its corners could be fitted with protective bronze bosses to shield the precious binding from the wear and tear of daily use on a stone lectern. A librarian inventorying the abbey's treasures might describe this volume in a shorthand that later generations would misread. An entry that reads Textus cum clausura aenea, a book with bronze fittings could, over a few hundred years and several messy copies, be misinterpreted by a later scribe as Textus aereus, a book made of bronze. A single dropped word, a blurry piece of ink, and a description of the binding transforms into a description of the entire object. The metaphor is just as plausible. A scholar, in a moment of poetic flourish, might describe a particularly authoritative and sturdy codex as being as durable as bronze, or a foundation of bronze for our faith. This metaphorical compliment, written in the margin of a text, could later be found by a literal-minded reader who took the phrase not as a figure of speech, but as a factual statement. This kind of error is not just hypothetical, it's a well-documented phenomenon in the study of ancient texts. The word palimpsest itself refers to a manuscript page that has been scraped clean and written over, but where the original, faded text remains partially visible beneath the new writing. Historians often act as detectives, using technology to read these underlying layers. The story of the Bronze Book could be a kind of conceptual palimpsest, where the original, literal meaning of a text, a book with bronze decorations, was scraped away by time and replaced with a new, more fantastical interpretation, a book made of bronze. The mundane truth faded, and the spectacular legend was written over it, becoming the only version that survived. This theory doesn't require Viking raids, church conspiracies, or miraculous metallurgy. It only requires the very human tendency to prefer a magnificent story over a mundane explanation, and the natural erosion of precise meaning that occurs over centuries of copying and translation. Sometimes the greatest mysteries are not solved by finding a hidden object, but by finally correctly reading a document that was in plain sight all along. Shifting our search from dusty manuscripts and metal forges to the vibrant world of Carolingian art opens up an entirely new avenue for investigation. While written records can be ambiguous, art offers a direct window into the visual culture of the era, a space where symbols and allegories were used to communicate complex ideas. Could the artists and mosaicists employed by Charlemagne's court have left us visual clues, hidden in plain sight within the breathtaking works they created? This line of inquiry turns every surviving fresco, ivory carving, and illuminated manuscript into a potential puzzle waiting to be solved. Our first and most logical stop is the very heart of Charlemagne's power, the Palatine Chapel in Aachen. The mosaics that once adorned the walls and ceilings, though heavily restored in later centuries, are a testament to imperial ideology. We scrutinize every depiction of the emperor, looking for any deviation from the standard iconography of a ruler holding an orb and scepter. Is he shown receiving a text from a saint or an angel that appears unusually heavy, its pages reflecting light in a way that suggests metal rather than parchment? Artists of the time were masters of symbolism. A book rendered in gleaming gold leaf against a background of duller colors could be a simple indicator of its sacred importance, or it could be a subtle nod to a far more extraordinary physical reality. The difficulty lies in interpretation. An artist's choice could be theological, not literal. A brilliantly illuminated book might represent the divine light of the Gospels, not a specific metallic object. Beyond Aachen, we must turn the pages of the few surviving luxury manuscripts commissioned by the court itself. The Coronation Gospels and the Ebo Gospels are masterpieces of illumination, but they focus on the evangelist, not the emperor. A more promising candidate is a later 9th century work, the Codex Aureus of St. Emram. This gospel book is a stunning example of Carolingian craftsmanship, its covers encrusted with gold and jewels. But within its illuminated pages, could there be a hidden hint? Some researchers have pointed to the dedication miniature, which depicts the ruler, likely Charles the Bald, Charlemagne's grandson, enthroned and receiving the book from the scribes. The book itself is painted with such lavish gold that it seems to shimmer with a metallic life of its own. While this is undoubtedly a representation of the very manuscript it is contained within, it also serves as a powerful visual metaphor for the ultimate luxury book, an object so precious it transcends its physical form. It doesn't prove the existence of a bronze book, but it powerfully illustrates how contemporary artists conceptualize the most valuable tomes in the imperial collection. Perhaps the most compelling visual evidence doesn't depict a book at all, but rather repurposes the idea of one. In the Lateran Palace in Rome, a much restored fresco believed to be from the Carolingian era shows a seated figure, often interpreted as a philosopher or evangelist, holding a tablet that is distinctly not a scroll or a codex. Its solid, rectangular form has led some to speculate it could represent a single plate or tablet. This sparks a fascinating possibility. What if the legend of the entire bronze book originated from a set of individual bronze tablets, similar to ancient Roman law codes? A collection of a dozen such plates stored together in a chest and bound by rings could easily have been described in monastic inventories as a book, for lack of a better term. Over centuries, this description could have been romanticized into the legend of a single, massive volume. This theory elegantly sidesteps the immense engineering problems of casting and binding large, thin plates, while still accommodating the core of the legend, that Charlemagne had vital information preserved on permanent bronze media. Ultimately, the search through Carolingian art is a lesson in managing expectations. We find no smoking gun, no clear illustration of Charlemagne reading from a gleaming metallic folio. What we do find is an artistic language rich with symbolism, where books are consistently used as icons of divine wisdom and imperial authority. The artists show us how the Carolingians thought about knowledge as something heavy, permanent, and radiant with sacred and political power. The visual record doesn't confirm the bronze book's existence, but it vividly illustrates the cultural mindset that could have given birth to such an ambitious idea. A world where the line between a metaphor for permanence and a literal object of bronze could become beautifully and eternally blurred. Perhaps the most compelling interpretation of this entire mystery lies not in a foundry or a hidden crypt, but in the cutthroat world of medieval geopolitics. We must remember that Charlemagne's coronation as Emperor of the Romans in the year 800 was not a universally celebrated event. In fact, it was a direct and calculated insult to the only other power that had a legitimate claim to that title, the Byzantine Empire in Constantinople. From their perspective, this rough, barbarian king from the northern forests was a usurper, a pretender to a throne they considered rightfully theirs. In this atmosphere of intense diplomatic hostility and propaganda warfare, the legend of the Bronze Book takes on a new and sinister light as a potential weapon. One fascinating theory suggests the story itself was not a Carolingian invention, but a brilliant piece of Byzantine misinformation designed to undermine their new rival. How better to discredit a supposedly pious Christian emperor than by whispering through diplomatic channels and merchant networks that he possessed a blasphemous book? They could have insinuated that this metal tome contained not sacred wisdom, but heretical knowledge, perhaps Gnostic gospels rejected by the church or arcane secrets looted from ancient pagan temples. The rumor would have been designed to portray Charlemagne not as a new Constantine, but as a dangerous sorcerer king, dabbling in forbidden arts to solidify his illegitimate power. The very permanence of the Bronze Book, which we viewed as a symbol of preservation, could be twisted into a symbol of hubris, a permanent record of his heresy, an everlasting testament to his sin. This kind of shadow war, fought with rumors and character assassination, was a standard tool of statecraft, and the Byzantines were its absolute masters. On the other hand, we must consider the possibility that Charlemagne and his brilliant advisors, like Alcuin of York, were the architects of their own myth. For a ruler trying to weld dozens of disparate tribes and nations into a unified empire, perception was everything. The illusion of power could be just as effective as power itself. Propagating a rumor of an indestructible, divinely sanctioned book containing the ultimate laws and truths of the realm would have been a psychological masterstroke. To a visiting ambassador from a rival kingdom or a rebellious local duke, the mere suggestion of such an object would be profoundly intimidating. It created an aura of unassailable authority around Charlemagne, suggesting that his rule was not just based on military might, but on a foundation of permanent, unimpeachable wisdom that could not be challenged or altered. It was the ultimate source of legitimacy, made not of fragile parchment but of enduring metal, reflecting the permanence he claimed for his empire. This wouldn't have been a lie to his people, but a powerful reinforcing myth, a story told to inspire loyalty and awe, much like the legendary Excalibur did for King Arthur. In an age where mystique was a form of currency, controlling the most captivating story could be more valuable than controlling an army. This framing transforms the mystery from an archaeological puzzle into a thrilling narrative of international intrigue and psychological manipulation. Whether the brainchild of Byzantine spies seeking to destabilize a rival or a calculated piece of Carolingian statecraft designed to project invincibility, the legend of the Bronze Book becomes a testament to the power of information itself. It shows us that in the 9th century, a well-crafted story could be a weapon to destroy an emperor's reputation or a shield to protect his throne. The truth of the object becomes almost irrelevant next to the potency of the idea. This theory doesn't require us to find the book. It only requires us to understand the minds of the people who might have had every reason to make the world believe it existed. The search for the Bronze Book has entered a new era, one where the tools of the 21st century are being brought to bear on this ancient enigma. This is no longer the domain of the lone scholar with a candle in a dusty archive. It is the realm of the digital archaeologist, a fusion of historian and technologist who uses cutting-edge science to peer through time itself. The hunt has been modernized, transforming from a speculative treasure hunt into a systematic, multidisciplinary investigation that offers our best hope yet of solving this enduring mystery. One of the most promising technologies is ground-penetrating radar, or GPR. This system works by sending high-frequency radio waves into the ground and then analyzing the signals that bounce back. Different materials, solid rock, loose soil, human-made voids all reflect these waves in uniquely identifiable ways. Deploying a comprehensive GPR survey around and beneath Aachen Cathedral could map the subsurface in astonishing detail, creating a three-dimensional ultrasound of the Earth. Researchers would not be looking for the book itself, but for the architectural echoes it might be hiding in. They would scan for the distinct signature of a hidden crypt, a blocked-off tunnel from the Carolingian era, or even an anomaly in the soil density that could suggest a long-forgotten burial site. The beauty of this method is its non-invasive nature. It requires no digging, no disruption to the sacred space, only the careful, methodical sweep of a sensor array over the ancient stones. A similar approach could be applied to the ruins of key monastic sites like Lorsch or Fulda, once intellectual powerhouses of the empire, searching for the foundations of lost scriptoria or treasury buildings that historical records have overlooked. Taking this a step further, light detection and ranging, or LiDAR, technology offers a way to see through the veil of time that covers the landscape itself. Mounted on aircraft or drones, LiDAR scanners fire millions of laser pulses at the ground, effectively digitally stripping away vegetation and modern construction to reveal the subtle, human-altered topography beneath. This has been revolutionary for finding lost Roman roads and buried Viking settlements. Applied to the forests and fields surrounding known Carolingian palaces, LiDAR could reveal the ghostly outlines of entirely unknown structures. A forgotten smithy large enough for a major project, the foundation of a small, isolated chapel that never appeared on any map, or the telltale signs of an old quarry that might have been used as a hiding place. These technologies allow us to survey vast areas with a precision that would have been pure magic to the 19th century treasure hunters, turning their lifetimes of guesswork into a matter of data analysis. Perhaps the most revolutionary tool lies not in the ground, but in the vast digital clouds of our global archives. Institutions around the world are undertaking the monumental task of digitizing medieval manuscripts, creating high-resolution, searchable online libraries. This presents an unprecedented opportunity. Artificial intelligence trained to read Carolingian minuscule script could be set loose on this colossal digital corpus. Its task would not be to find the words Bronze Book, which are likely absent, but to identify subtle patterns and correlations that a human reader would almost certainly miss. It could flag every single mention of an unusual expenditure of copper or tin in a monastic ledger, or isolate every poetic reference to imperishable knowledge or metal pages across hundreds of chronicles and letters. The AI could cross-reference these finds with geographic data, perhaps revealing that such references cluster oddly around a specific, otherwise unremarkable monastery, giving us a brand new location to focus our physical search. This is where the real breakthrough may occur, not in a dramatic excavation, but in the silent, instantaneous connection of two data points that have been separated for over 1,000 years. We are standing at a unique crossroads of history and technology, where our ability to ask the questions has finally caught up with our desire to answer them. The combination of subsurface radar, aerial laser scanning, and powerful artificial intelligence provides a toolkit that Charlemagne himself could never have imagined. It allows us to search without destroying, to analyze without intruding, and to dream with a foundation in real, tangible science. The mystery of the Bronze Book is no longer confined to the pages of history. It is a puzzle waiting to be solved in the language of data, a digital ghost that we are now uniquely equipped to find. To truly understand the origins of this legend, we must become text detectives, picking up a linguistic magnifying glass to examine the very words written by medieval scribes. The journey begins not with grand excavations, but with the meticulous, patient work of philologist scholars who study historical language and its evolution. The most critical term we encounter time and again in the original Latin chronicles is the word aereus. In classical Latin, this adjective directly means made of bronze or of bronze. It's a straightforward, material description. But language is a living, breathing thing, and meanings can soften and shift over centuries, especially in the hands of monastic writers who are deeply influenced by theological and poetic traditions. In a medieval context, aereus could also be used metaphorically to signify something that possesses the qualities of bronze: permanence, durability, and unyielding strength. A chronicler praising the emperor's new legal code might describe its principles as aereus, not meaning the laws were literally inscribed on metal, but that they were established to be as enduring and unchanging as bronze itself. This single, flexible word is the fork in the road for our entire investigation. Do we take it as a literal, physical description, or do we recognize it as a powerful figure of speech common to the era's literary style? The other half of the phrase is just as important. The words liber and codex were both used to describe a book, but they carried their own subtle distinctions. A liber often referred to the inner content, the text itself, the words written on the pages. A codex, however, specifically denoted the physical object, the bound pages and its covers. This is a crucial difference. A source describing a liber aereus could potentially be interpreted as a text whose wisdom is bronze-like in its permanence. But a description of a codex aereus leans much more heavily toward defining the object's physical construction. The problem is that many medieval writers used these terms somewhat interchangeably, blurring the lines and leaving modern translators to wrestle with their true intent. Furthermore, we must consider the possibility of a simple scribble error. In the dim light of a scriptorium, a tired monk copying an ancient text might easily misread a word. The Latin word for wax, cera, if written messily, could be misread as area bronze. A phrase about a book with wax tablets or sealed with wax could, over generations of copying, have transformed into the far more spectacular Book of Bronze, sending historians on a wild goose chase for over 1,000 years. This linguistic investigation doesn't stop with Latin. We must also look to the vernacular languages of the time, particularly Old High German, which was spoken in Charlemagne's court. Did any similar concepts exist there? The Old High German word for bronze or copper is aereus, which shares a root with the Latin aeus, bronze. While no direct written references to a bronze book survive in Old High German, the potential for cross-linguistic poetic metaphor is fascinating. A German-speaking poet at court, seeking to flatter the emperor, might have used a phrase like Erzin wisdom, meaning wisdom as hard and lasting as brass, which a Latin-speaking scribe could have later translated and solidified into the more concrete liber aereus. This process of translation and transmission across languages and cultures is a breeding ground for misunderstandings, where a beautiful turn of phrase in one tongue can accidentally congeal into a statement of fact in another. By dissecting these words, we aren't diminishing the legend. We are appreciating the incredible complexity of historical recovery and acknowledging that sometimes the most captivating mysteries aren't hidden in the ground, but are woven into the very fabric of the words we use to describe the past. But what if the ultimate fate of the Bronze Book wasn't destruction or disappearance, but translation? Let's consider a different scenario, one that shifts the quest from a search for metal to a hunt for parchment. Suppose the book was real and its contents were deemed so vital that the Carolingian court, in a moment of prescient genius, ordered a backup. The most brilliant scribes at Aachen or Tours could have been given the monumental task of transcribing every word from those immutable metal plates onto the most luxurious vellum available. This wouldn't have been a simple copy job, it would have been an act of consecration. Imagine the scene: a master calligrapher, his hand guided by the most senior scholar, perhaps even Alcuin himself, carefully tracing each letter from the cool, hard bronze onto soft, cream-colored parchment. The original would remain the ultimate, indestructible authority, but this vellum duplicate would serve as a working copy, a way to disseminate this crucial wisdom to key monastic centers across the empire without risking the priceless original on perilous journeys. This theory elegantly solves many of the practical problems we've discussed. It bypasses the near-impossible metallurgy while preserving the core idea of the book's profound content. The immense value then transfers from the object itself to the information it holds. The hunt for the Bronze Book transforms into a search for a unique manuscript, one that would stand out starkly from any other Carolingian codex. This transcript would be instantly recognizable to any expert who found it. It would lack a standard scribble colophon, the note at the end of a manuscript identifying the scribe and the circumstances of its creation, because its origin would be a state secret of the highest order. Instead, it might begin with a dramatic preamble. Herein lies the wisdom from the eternal pages, transcribed by order of the Emperor Charles. The script would be a perfect exemplar of Carolingian minuscule, but the text itself would be unlike any other. Would it be a complete legal codex, a singular gospel, or a collection of astronomical tables? Its contents would be its defining feature, a body of knowledge so coherent and advanced for its time that it could only be a copy of a singular, authoritative source. So where would such a transcript be hidden? If it was created as a safeguard, its keepers would have taken extraordinary measures to protect it. The most likely locations are the great imperial abbeys that served as the nerve centers of Charlemagne's intellectual network. A place like Lorsch Abbey, with its famed library and scriptorium, would be a prime candidate. Its librarians were known for their meticulous inventories, and a book of such unique provenance would have been catalogued with great care, possibly under a deliberately obscure name to shield its true importance. Alternatively, it could have been sent to a more remote, fortified monastery for protection. a place like Reichenau on an island in Lake Constance or St. Maurice d'Agon in the Swiss Alps, which served as a strategic armory and sanctuary. In these secluded communities, the manuscript could have been integrated into the liturgical library, its true origin known only to the abbot and passed down as a sacred trust through generations. The tragic irony, of course, is that this very act of preservation could have led to its disappearance. If the monastery that held the transcript was later sacked by Vikings, Magyars, or during the 30 Years' War, the raiders would have been looking for gold and silver, not old books. The vellum transcript could have been tossed aside, trampled, or burned while reliquaries were pillaged. Its survival would have been a matter of chance. A sympathetic soldier might have rescued it from the flames, later selling it to a local scholar for a pittance. From there, it could have entered the vast and murky stream of the antiquarian book trade, its covers perhaps stripped and rebound, its identifying preamble lost to damage, leaving it an anonymous but perplexing text in a private collection. It could be sitting on a shelf right now, miscatalogued in a European library, its Carolingian script recognized but its extraordinary significance completely overlooked, waiting for a researcher with the right knowledge to finally connect the dots and understand that they are not holding just another medieval manuscript, but the ghost of a legend, the echo of an emperor's dream made not metal but of skin and ink. Yet the most compelling argument against the Bronze Book's physical reality comes not from what these sources say, but from what they pointedly and almost suspiciously omit. To understand the weight of this silence, we must turn to the most intimate and detailed portrait of the emperor that survives, Einhard's Vita Caroli Magni, the life of Charlemagne. Einhard was not a distant chronicler. He was a member of the inner court circle, a close friend and advisor who lived in the palace at Aachen for years. His biography is filled with personal anecdotes, meticulous lists of the emperor's building projects, his personal habits, his clothing, even the names of his daughters and the fact that he slept poorly. He catalogues the treasures Charlemagne sent to the Pope, describes his diplomatic efforts in meticulous detail, and recounts his various military campaigns. This is a document obsessed with the emperor's legacy, eager to record his greatness for posterity. Given this exhaustive, almost gossipy level of detail, the complete absence of any mention of a monumental project to cast an entire library in bronze is not just a minor oversight, it is a thundering silence. Imagine the sheer scale of such an endeavor. It would have required the coordination of the empire's finest metalsmiths, a staggering allocation of strategic resources, and years of painstaking labor. For Einhard, this would have been the crowning achievement of his patron's cultural project, the ultimate symbol of his wisdom and his desire for permanence. He boasts of the king importing beautiful columns from Rome for his chapel. He would certainly have boasted of forging an entire book from bronze. The fact that he does not even hint at it suggests that, in his reality, no such object existed. This silence from the source closest to the man himself is arguably the single most powerful piece of evidence for those who argue the book was a later legend or a misunderstood metaphor. This pattern of omission extends beyond Einhard to other comprehensive contemporary works. The Royal Frankish Annals, the official year-by-year record of the empire, document wars, coronations, famines, and the movements of the court with dry efficiency. They note the arrival of an elephant from the Caliph of Baghdad, a spectacle so astonishing it merited an entry. The creation of a revolutionary, imperishable medium for knowledge would have been an event of similar, if not greater, significance, yet the annals are utterly silent on the matter. The monastic chroniclers at centers like Lorsch and Fulda, who are deeply invested in the Carolingian intellectual revival and often recorded donations of books and treasures to their libraries, also make no mention of receiving or even hearing of such an artifact. When every major source that should mention something of that magnitude fails to do so, historians are forced to conclude that the most logical explanation is that it wasn't there to be mentioned. This negative evidence is a legitimate and powerful tool in historical inquiry. We must listen to what the past is shouting by not saying a word. Even with the evidence leaning against its physical existence, the enduring power of the legend reveals something far more profound about us than it does about Charlemagne. This isn't just a historical mystery, it's a psychological mirror. The persistent allure of the Bronze Book speaks to a deep, almost primal human yearning for a tangible connection to a perceived golden age, a time when giants walked the earth and wisdom was pure, uncorrupted, and absolute. In our complex, information-saturated modern world, the idea of a single, perfect source of truth, a complete answer key to history's greatest questions, literally set in unchangeable metal, is irresistibly comforting. It represents a solution to the anxiety of impermanence, a guarantee that what matters most cannot be lost to fire, war, or the simple forgetfulness of time. We are haunted by the fragility of knowledge, by the burning of the Library of Alexandria and the countless silent disappearances of history, and this legend offers a fantastical antidote, a library that even the flames cannot touch. This fascination is also driven by the pure, childlike thrill of the unsolved puzzle. The human brain is wired to seek patterns and solve mysteries. It's why we love detective stories, riddles, and treasure hunts. The Bronze Book is the ultimate cold case, a mystery with a 1,200-year head start. It invites us to become armchair detectives, sifting through the clues left by medieval chroniclers, debating the merits of metallurgy, and imagining ourselves as the one person who might finally see the pattern everyone else has missed. There is no greater tease for the curious mind than an open-ended question, a story without a final chapter. The possibility, however faint, that we might one day find it, is a powerful engine for both scholarly inquiry and wild speculation. It keeps the story alive, transforming it from a dry academic footnote into a living, breathing narrative that we can all participate in. Ultimately, the Bronze Book transcends its own story to become the perfect historical what if. It exists in that beautiful, liminal space between history and myth, where just enough plausible detail meets just enough ambiguity to fuel the imagination for centuries. It doesn't really matter if it was real. What matters is that it could have been. This possibility allows us to project our own hopes and curiosities onto its mythical pages. For some, it contains lost spiritual truths. For others, it holds the secret political blueprint for a united Europe. For others still, it is a time capsule of advanced ancient science. The legend is a blank canvas, and we are the painters. Our continuous retelling and reimagining of the story is, in itself, a form of homage to Charlemagne's original dream, a collective act of preservation, ensuring that the idea, if not the object, achieves a different kind of immortality. The Bronze Book may never be found in a crypt, but it has already been found over and over again in the most powerful library of all, the human imagination. Unfortunately, the tantalizing allure of the legendary Bronze Book has proven to be an irresistible temptation for opportunists and con artists throughout history. The very qualities that make the story so compelling, its mystery, its association with a legendary emperor, and the immense value such an artifact would command, have also made it a prime target for forgery. The 18th and 19th centuries in particular saw a golden age for this kind of historical fraud, a period when a burgeoning interest in antiquities among the European wealthy collided with a still developing science of authentication. It was the perfect environment for a clever forger to plant a fake and watch it grow. One of the most infamous cases emerged in Vienna around 1790. A collection of 12 bronze plates bound together with heavy iron rings was presented to a group of eager antiquarians. The plates were covered in a script that bore a superficial resemblance to Carolingian minuscule, though heavily stylized and inconsistent. The text purported to be a lost chronicle detailing Charlemagne's secret coronation rituals and his personal prophecies for the future of Europe. The sheer audacity of the find caused a sensation in certain circles. The forger, understanding the psychological pull of the legend, had crafted a narrative that tapped directly into the romantic nationalism of the era. However, the deception began to unravel under the scrutiny of a meticulous linguist named Father Johann Fischer. Fischer noticed that the script wasn't just poorly copied, it was anachronistic. The letter forms included stylistic flourishes that didn't emerge until centuries after Charlemagne's death, a clear sign of someone trying to make the text look old without understanding the evolution of writing. Furthermore, the Latin itself was riddled with grammatical errors and modern syntactic constructions that a 9th century scribe would never have used. The plates were exposed as a modern fantasy, a cynical attempt to profit from the desires of collectors who wished to hold a piece of the myth in their hands. This was not an isolated incident. Across Europe, as museums and private cabinets of curiosity grew in popularity, so did the market for convincing fakes. Another notorious example appeared in Paris in 1842. A single, large bronze plate claiming to be a leaf from the Great Book itself, depicting a complex astrological chart used by the emperor's scholars to plan his campaigns. The forgery was more sophisticated, using a more accurate period script. Its downfall was not the language but the science. An astronomer at the Sorbonne was consulted to verify the celestial alignment depicted. He quickly determined that the positions of the stars and planets corresponded not to a date in the 8th or 9th century, but to a configuration visible from Paris in the early 1800s. The forger, in a stroke of ironic vanity, had used a contemporary almanac as his reference, forever dating his creation to his own time and not Charlemagne's. The battle against these frauds has sharpened the tools of historical authentication into a precise science. Modern experts operate like a forensic team, attacking the question of authenticity from every possible angle. Material analysis is often the first and most decisive step. Using techniques like X-ray fluorescence spectroscopy, scientists can analyze the metal's composition without damaging the artifact. Carolingian bronze has a specific chemical signature, including trace impurities from period mining and smelting techniques. A modern alloy, no matter how cleverly aged, will betray itself through the presence of elements like zinc or antimony in proportions unknown in the early medieval period. Paleographers, specialists in ancient handwriting, perform a similarly vital role. They examine the script with a microscopic eye, assessing the pen strokes, or in this case, the chisel strikes. The exact angle of a serif, the spacing between letters, and the consistency of the hand can reveal whether the text was written by a scribe trained in a specific historical tradition or by a modern imitator working from a limited set of examples. Linguistic analysis scrutinizes the grammar, vocabulary, and syntax, searching for anachronistic words or phrases that would be invisible to a layperson. This perpetual arms race between forgers and authenticators is a fascinating subplot in the larger story. Each failed fake teaches experts something new, adding another layer of defense against the next attempt. The persistence of these hoaxes, while frustrating, is also a backhanded compliment to the power of the legend. They prove that the idea of Charlemagne's Bronze Book holds such sway over our imagination that for over 200 years, individuals have been willing to risk exposure and disgrace to make it real, if only through deception. These fakes are the dark echo of our own desire to believe, a reminder that the most valuable treasure is not always the artifact itself, but the truth behind it. And so, the great irony of this ancient mystery reveals itself. While the Bronze Book itself remains an elusive specter, its ghost has been one of the most productive forces in modern Carolingian studies. The relentless, centuries-long quest to find this single legendary object has, in its roundabout way, unearthed a treasure trove of very real history, fundamentally shaping our understanding of Charlemagne's world. This pursuit, often driven by romantic obsession, has yielded profoundly practical and scholarly rewards. proving that sometimes the search is far more valuable than the prize. Consider the archaeological fervor of the 19th century, a period electrified by nationalism and a romantic yearning for a heroic past. The legend of the Bronze Book provided a perfect, glittering objective for these early excavators. Men like the German baron and avid collector Heinrich von Stein weren't just digging at random, they were following leads, however faint, derived from their readings of medieval chronicles. Their belief that the book was hidden in a sealed crypt beneath a specific monastery or palace led them to secure funding and permissions to break ground in places that might otherwise have been overlooked. While they never found their metallic library, their shovels and picks often struck something else of immense value: the foundations of lost Carolingian chapels, the intricate floor plans of imperial palaces, and hordes of artifacts that painted a vivid picture of daily life in the 8th and 9th centuries. Their methods were crude by today's standards, but their motivation, the chase for a myth, unlocked the first real physical evidence of the empire's grandeur. This trickle-down effect extended powerfully into the world of academic research and museum curation. The tantalizing possibility of the book's existence has been a compelling hook for securing grants and public interest for over a century. A proposal to investigate potential Carolingian metallurgical projects might gather dust, but a project titled "In Search of Charlemagne's Bronze Book" captures the imagination and, crucially, opens wallets. This funding has financed the painstaking cataloging of thousands of medieval manuscripts, the isotopic analysis of metal artifacts to trace their origins, and the high-resolution digitization of crumbling texts. Scholars, while perhaps privately skeptical of the book's reality, have used the public's fascination with the legend as a gateway to study the very real and astonishing achievements of Carolingian scribes, lawyers, and architects. The myth funded the science, and the science, in turn, gave us a far richer and more nuanced portrait of the period than any single artifact ever could. Perhaps the most stunning example of this serendipitous discovery is the story of what was found beneath Charlemagne's throne in Aachen Cathedral. In 1861, architect Friedrich Albert wasn't looking for just anything. He was actively searching for clues to the emperor's greatest treasures, very likely inspired by the legends of hidden wonders. When he investigated the space below the royal seat, he didn't find a book of bronze, but he struck historical gold, the lost treasury of the Carolingians. This sealed chamber contained a breathtaking collection of artifacts, including the magnificent laudatory cross, a masterpiece of early medieval goldsmithing, and a wealth of Roman and Byzantine antiquities that Charlemagne himself had collected. This find was a watershed moment, instantly transforming our understanding of imperial art and ceremony. It was a discovery made not by accident, but as a direct result of a targeted search driven by the allure of a greater legend. The pursuit of a phantom had led to the recovery of a very real and magnificent piece of the puzzle. Beyond individual finds, the relentless focus on the book has forced historians to ask deeper, more interesting questions about the period. To prove or disprove its existence, they've had to become detectives in the fields of materials science, economics, and logistics. They've had to calculate the output of Carolingian mines to see if such a vast quantity of bronze was even available. They've studied the travel routes of Norse raiders to map the most likely paths of destruction. They've analyzed monastic library inventories with a fine-tooth comb, looking for any anomalous entry. This multidisciplinary approach, sparked by a myth, has given us a breathtakingly holistic view of the era. Not just its kings and battles, but its supply chains, its trade networks, and the incredible capabilities of its artisans. The legend, in its refusal to be easily dismissed, has compelled us to see the Carolingian world in full color and 3 dimensions. In the end, the lasting legacy of the search for the Bronze Book of Charlemagne is not a dusty artifact in a museum case. It is the very framework of modern Carolingian studies itself. It is the excavated floor plans of the palace at Ingelheim, the meticulously restored frescoes in the Lorsch Gate Hall, and the digital archives that allow a scholar in Tokyo to read a manuscript from rhymes. The ghost of the book guided the hands of excavators, focused the minds of researchers, and captivated a public that ultimately funded the recovery of its own history. The legend promised a single, dazzling answer, but the search provided something far more valuable: 1,000,000 smaller, truthful questions and the means to answer them. The greatest treasure was never hidden in a crypt. It was buried in plain sight all along, waiting for a good story to inspire us to start digging. After exploring every shadowy corner of this mystery, from the heat of a Carolingian forge to the cold logic of modern science, we are left standing at a crossroads, forced to weigh the evidence for and against the Bronze Book's existence. This is not a simple task of listing pros and cons. It is an exercise in balancing two compelling, yet entirely different visions of the past. On one side of the scale, we place the formidable arguments of the skeptic. The complete and thundering silence from those who should have known best. Einhard, in his intimate biography, The Meticulous Royal Frankish Annals, is perhaps the heaviest counterweight. How could a project of such monumental scale, cost, and ambition leave not a single ripple in the most detailed records of the age? Coupled with this is the sheer physical impracticality. The metallurgical challenges of casting large, flat, flawless plates, the insane difficulty of inscribing them without error, the staggering weight and immobility of the finished object, all these point toward a logistical nightmare, if not an outright impossibility, with 9th century technology. This leads us compellingly to the symbolic interpretation that the Bronze Book was always a powerful metaphor for the permanence Charlemagne sought for his laws, his faith, and his empire itself, a brilliant piece of propaganda that was never meant to be held, only believed in. Yet, when we turn to the other side of the scale, we find that it is far from empty. It holds the undeniable weight of Charlemagne's own character and proven accomplishments. This was a man who thought in centuries, not years, a ruler who could marshal the resources to build a new Rome at Aachen, who could orchestrate a continent-wide revival of learning, and who could redefine the very concept of empire in the West. For such a man was a library cast in metal truly beyond the realm of imagination. The persistent multi-source legends emerging from different monastic traditions suggest a story with a kernel of truth that refused to be erased, even if it was embellished over time. And finally, we must account for the vast, aching silence of the era itself, the countless manuscripts, artifacts, and entire buildings that have been lost to 1,000 years of fire, war, and decay. Our understanding of the Carolingian world is built on the fragments that survived, not the totality of what once was. The absence of evidence is not, as the saying goes, evidence of absence. So where does this leave us? The most satisfying resolution is not a binary yes or no, but a synthesis and acknowledgement that the truth likely lies in the nuanced space between literal and literary. Perhaps the legendary Bronze Book was not a single, glorious tome, but something far simpler that became grander with each telling. Imagine a set of important legal decrees or a foundational charter, cast onto a few significant bronze tablets in the Roman tradition and displayed in a palace square for all to see, a powerful symbol of unchanging law. Or consider a particularly magnificent gospel book, its wooden covers sheathed in protective and beautifully engraved bronze plates, its heavy metal clasp securing the sacred text within. A monastic chronicler seeing this masterpiece might later describe it in poetic terms as the Book of Bronze, a phrase that, over centuries of copying and translation, slowly lost its metaphorical meaning and solidified into a statement of fact. This original, magnificent object, itself a treasure, could have been the seed from which the entire towering legend grew, a single reality endlessly elaborated by poets, storytellers, and wishful thinkers across the ages. The real Bronze Book of Charlemagne may therefore be both a lost physical artifact and an immortal idea, a testament to how the most enduring histories are often woven from equal parts metal and myth. And so, after this grand expedition through time, science, and legend, we find ourselves back where we began, not with an answer, but with a far richer and more beautiful question. Our journey started with a whisper in a dusty chronicle and carried us through the intellectual revolution of Charlemagne's court, into the fiery forges of master metalsmiths, and across the treacherous landscape of medieval politics and propaganda. We've sifted through the sobering silence of the historical record and marveled at the incredible finds that the search itself has uncovered. We've seen how a simple metaphor could be transformed by generations of storytellers into a tangible, gleaming grail, and how the enduring human desire for permanent truth gives this legend its timeless power. Whether a physical artifact lost to a Viking's melting pot or a brilliant piece of poetic statecraft, the Bronze Book stands as a mighty symbol of an emperor's colossal ambition to reshape a continent and illuminate a dark age. It represents the ultimate human defiance against the decay of time, the dream of casting our most precious knowledge in a form that could outlast empires. This mystery endures not because it is unsolvable, but because it is too meaningful to ever truly be solved. It invites us to wonder, to debate, and to keep looking, reminding us that history is not just a collection of facts, but a living conversation between the past and the present. Now we turn the final page over to you. After hearing the evidence, where does your conviction lie? Do you see the legend as a magnificent metaphor, a lost treasure waiting for its Indiana Jones, or something else entirely? The comment section is your court, your scholarly symposium. Share your theory, your favorite clue, or a historical enigma you'd love to see us explore next. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the shadows of history, make sure to subscribe and hit the bell so you don't miss our next journey into the unknown. Until then, keep wondering. The past is full of stories, and every one of them is waiting for someone to listen.